Well, good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to our first Inside Story of the program year. Our theme for the Inside Story this year is of prayer and pilgrimage. And so Rosan came immediately to mind. She came immediately to mind because she travels through life and goes, hither, thither, and yon with great zest and adventure. And she's going to talk a little bit about one of her more recent adventures with us today. But I think about Rosan in relation to prayer and pilgrimage because of how I first came to know her, which is when she invited me out for coffee years and years ago to sit down and talk about just the kind of things that are in our letter from Paul in this morning's liturgy. So if you haven't been to Mass yet, spoiler alert, but this is what he says. Have no anxiety at all, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, make your requests known to God. Then the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Keep on doing what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me. Then the God of peace will be with you. And so when I think about Rosan, I think about someone who truly incarnates and tries to live out of this passage from Paul. And I hope that as we listen with her today, we listen for these reflections. Thank you for being with us, Rosan.
Well, good morning, and thank you all for coming. I think you can all hear me. So I'm here, as Julie said, to share my experience walking the Camino de Santiago, actually the Camino Frances, one of the many routes of the Camino de Santiago, from March 19th to April 17th of this past year. I'm going to start with sharing, talking about my experience, and then I have some slides that I'm not sure we'll get through all of them. I culled my over 600 down to about 40, and we'll see if we have time for all those. They're not travelogue pictures at all. They're pictures that were meaningful to me. And so, yeah, you'll see some things you think, oh, that's pretty crazy, that's not meaningful. So I should speak up? I'll try, but raise your hand if you lose me in the back, okay? So at the end of the slides, then we should have some time talking about some questions, okay? So just as a little background, I'd heard about the Camino many times over many, many years, and thought, that'd be so cool to do. I'd love to walk. I like to walk long distances. Rick and I did a 10-mile hike yesterday on the Ice Age Trail, and I love doing that. So that would be cool. I could carry a backpack. That would be cool. It would just be a cool thing to do. It would be an adventure. So over the course of my life, and actually it wasn't until I retired about 8 years ago that this even became a possibility. Many people will do the Camino in short segments. I really wanted to do it at once if I was going to do it at all. So it wasn't until after I retired 8 years ago that I even had the time to think about it. But other adventures got in the way, other hiking trips and biking trips. And so it wasn't until 2022 that I began to think about it more seriously. And I don't know what really triggered it other than maybe the fact that I'm getting older. And I thought, I need to do this. And as I began to read more guidebooks, listen to more podcasts, the idea became really compelling for me. And I thought that God was really calling me or pushing me to do this, that I needed to make time or I would regret it for the rest of my life. And I'm sorry, my legs are just shaking. So yeah, we'll talk more about that reading that Julie brought up this morning. Okay, so one of the things that I used in preparation, and Father Tom Lindner referred me to this book as he did the Camino a number of years ago, was a guidebook by John Brierley called The Practical and Mystical Path for the Modern Day Pilgrim. And it is filled with lots of practical information, maps, cultural stops along the way, places to stay, places to eat, everything. But every section also had a place for the inner journey. Places that he raised questions, had quotes in there, just prompting you to think about things. And it really wasn't until I started looking at that I started kind of thinking about my spiritual journey in the, what had brought me to this point, more as a pilgrimage, a movement toward the holy, the divine, something really calling me. In addition to all the practical things that John Brierley had in his book, he says, the biggest part of your preparation really has to be your inner motivation. Why are you doing this? Spend time on that and the whole experience will be much more rewarding. So I did, start, just really contemplating that and thinking back about what had brought me here, and certainly my long-term membership in the Roman Catholic Church has been part of that spiritual pilgrimage. It has provided me a community wherever, we lived. It's been really moments of sacramental grace within the church. It has kind of helped form my social justice outlook, my spiritual outlook. I've met many, many what I call salt of the earth people through the Catholic Church. So it's been really, part of a great pilgrimage. But I will say, in all honesty, for the last number of years, my pilgrimage with the Roman Catholic Church has not always been smooth. This wasn't part of my motivation for doing the Camino. For many people it is. For me, it was not. So why did I, what was my motivation? And simply, I think it was to create space for God in my life in a new way, in a new setting, to hear God differently, to walk with God. One of the resources I had as I started walking was a book recommended by Julie called 40 Days with Julian of Norwich. And one of the first readings in there kind of affirmed that decision for me. Julian of Norwich says, with a little paraphrasing on my part, God reveals herself as she wants to. If God wants you to know her in a truer way, she will create the circumstances that drive you to seek her more deeply. And simply put, I think it really came together when it was meant to. I think God created the circumstances for me to do this pilgrimage. I think had I done it 10 years ago, when I first retired, my pilgrimage would have been much different. It would have been more of a journey. It would have been about meeting certain expectations that I had, having to walk every step of the way, having to carry my backpack every step of the way. And I had to give myself permission that, you know what? If I get blisters, injuries, and I need to take the bus, that's okay. If I need to transport my backpack because there are all sorts of transport services, that's okay. So in many ways, I think that God created the circumstances when it was meant to happen. So very quickly, and I know there are some people here who did the Camino, my routine, probably like theirs, became walking, eating, finding a place to stay, taking a shower, doing laundry, eating, and an early bedtime, with some reading and some sightseeing along the way in the villages as you had energy to do that at the end of the day. Met lots of, new people, lovely people, good people. I really enjoyed the public art. For those of you who have traveled in Europe, many cities, I mean, these were little villages that we passed through, and there was always public art. And so to me, that was a meaningful part of my trip too. New birds that I heard and some I saw, but that was fun for me too. But it was in the walking that I became really closer to God. And at one point, kind of in a moment of levity, I thought, walking could be my superpower. I really only got 2 little tiny blisters that I took care of right away, and that they didn't bother me anymore. I had 2 days where I got shin splints, and I was able to get ice from the bar owners and iced my legs down, took some ibuprofen, and got some magic cream made by a special formulation from another pilgrim. Here, take this, it's great, it works. And so, and actually the shin splints went away. I had no problems after that. So when I say walking was my superpower, I kind of think it was. But most importantly, walking really became my prayer. That movement, that just distance and time, and just a long conversation between God and me. There was one day that I read any news headlines. Other than that, I didn't look at any news. I only listened to podcasts on days that really got kind of long and hard. So not very many. So it was just this kind of constant conversation of God in nature, God in the people, God in just the walking. Some simple things that I guess I learned for me, and when I read or heard the reading this morning, I had to kind of chuckle because I know I have some issues with being nervous and anxiety, but whoa, this came home to me on the Camino about really silly, stupid things. And I would spend, there were 2 days in particular where I think I spent like 3 hours, my whole morning walk, just thinking about, one of them was a day I did ship my backpack, which I did probably 4 or 5 times out of like 28 days because I was walking over 30 kilometers, so 30 kilometers is 18 miles. So a couple days I did 32, 33, 34 kilometers, and some of those days it was hot. It was hotter than I thought it was going to be in March in Spain. So I decided, I gave myself permission, I'm going to have my backpack transported. But then I worried so much about, oh my gosh, should I have kept something out of my backpack? Should I have carried it with me? What? See, it was silly, But those kinds of things I thought really get in all of that time that I was thinking about that, I just couldn't get in touch with the spiritual side of things. And so I really tried to be mindful of that since. I'm an introvert, and the thought of being by myself was really attractive to me. But I must say, I found out quickly that I really needed other people in my life. I needed people that I could have some good conversations with. Not, bon camino, and you say that to everybody you meet, but I found that wasn't enough for me. I needed to have people in my life, and I met some wonderful, wonderful people. I guess most importantly, it was just a experience of walking with God, both physically and spiritually. I think for the first time in my life, sort of feeling the presence of God in such a fuller way. One day I can picture the place, and I thought, I think that's Jesus walking right next to me. And I've never really had that kind of physical image of Jesus in my life, in his high-tech hiking clothes. And I don't remember any blast of light or any tingling in my toes or any, I don't know. It was just like, well, here we go. Walk along, just like you would any other pilgrim. In kind of a, this is something I've experienced before, as I'm sure many of you had, where different parts of your life come together and you think, wow, this is amazing. But I was there during Lent and then through the Easter services. But the readings, the Mass readings of the day, which I had to give us this day, and I tried to continue with that as I do every day, the morning prayer and the Mass readings. And then I had some other things that I get delivered to my email box from Richard Rohr, and something called Unfolding Light, just little meditations. But Julian of Norwich too, and during Lent, there was a reading where the blind man asks Jesus to be healed. Jesus is in a crowd, and the blind man asks Jesus to be healed. And I read that, and I thought, wow, would I ever have done that? I'm an introvert, for one thing. Am I going to go up to somebody in a crowd and say, hey, pay attention to me? No, not going to do it. But then I thought, wow, that guy really had guts. He really believed in his value and his worth to say, because at a time when blindness could have been seen as payment for sins or the sins of your ancestors, here he was saying, I'm worth it, heal me. And Julian of Norwich asked this question: do you know beyond all doubt that I am loved by God beyond all measure? And that just kind of hit me. Do I know beyond all doubt that I am loved by God beyond all measure? I spent lots of time thinking about that one, lots of time. Another thing that kind of did harken back to my Catholic roots, I sometimes found myself looking at other pilgrims and like, their backpack is really big. I wonder what they have in there. I wonder how much they're carrying. Or their backpack is really light. What am I carrying that they're not carrying? How are they managing this? Or, they're not that far ahead of me. Wonder if I will catch them. Not that it mattered if I caught them, but it was just kind of going through my head. And so I thought, okay, this is getting out of hand. So every time I found myself doing a comparison, I'd say a Hail Mary. And at the beginning of the journey, I was doing a lot of Hail Marys. By the end, not so many. But again, and Julian of Norwich speaks up, and I sort of felt like, okay, here's this, I think she was 13 years old when she was living in this hermitage and getting all of these visions, and I found her to be actually just delightful. But she said, hey, we must not measure everything by how it affects us, judging other people according to our standards. We just must love them. So I thought, okay, there are just so many instances of all of these different parts of my life coming together. If I had to pick one word that described my pilgrimage, it would be joy. Just this deep, deep, abiding sense of joy. Doesn't mean there weren't some hard days. Walking through the Meseta, this agricultural area, which I think I found was quite beautiful even when nothing was really growing because it was March, but it was also hot those days. Well, probably 75, 80 degrees, and the wind was blowing at probably 20 miles an hour for 3 days straight. It was hard, but there was just a lot of joy and gratitude. I was there during Holy Week, as I said, and although I didn't go to any services, because whatever, the timing didn't work out, the language barrier, many little churches were closed at that time of the year, but I had such meaningful insights into Holy Thursday, the meaning of Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter, that I'm sure all of you have had that Triduum experience that you can go back to and say that was really meaningful. Well, this was one for me, and none of it occurred in a Catholic church. But it was, you know, the readings, and I was in a church, not just in a church during the time of the service. So to tie back into, you know, some of my previous comments about my pilgrimage with the Roman Catholic Church, the Camino did not resolve that tension for me, nor did I really ask it to. But it did help me see in really an ever more expansive way that my spiritual pilgrimage can't just be for me. The Camino was such an experience of sharing of humanity with different nationalities, different languages, but oh my gosh, at night, sleeping with 12 or 15 or 30 other pilgrims, and everybody has their own unique little noises or loud noises. I'm a light sleeper, and so I knew this would be a challenge going in, and it was a challenge. But yeah, you really got to think, wow, this is humanity. Oh, I just will tell you one thing. 2 a.m. in Lyon, I decided to stay in a private hotel room. 2 a.m. and Lyon has a whole week of celebration of Holy Week. But at 2 a.m. there's somebody above me doing a flamenco dance. And if you've ever heard somebody doing a flamenco dance, it has a particular rhythm, and yes. I thought, well, it's such an inspired dance, surely she can't be doing it for too long. And I mean, it was almost comical. It was just, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So yeah, humanity. So when I got to Santiago, I got there early in the morning, arrived intentionally. I got there by about 8 a.m., so I only walked about 10 kilometers that day. And then at noon, I went to the Pilgrim's Mass at the cathedral. And, you know, the cathedral is huge, ornate. It's filled with people, and all in Spanish. But they do announce the pilgrims, not the names of the pilgrims that have arrived, but the places that they started from all along the way. So it's kind of cool, because you can, even with a Spanish accent, you can hear that. But the next day, I went to the English-speaking Pilgrim's Mass at the Pilgrim's office, a small little chapel, small little chapel, but really beautiful. There was a Filipino priest there. The mission is kind of expanded with an order of Irish nuns who provide coffee and tea and cookies, biscuits, after Mass, and then just for a time for English-speaking pilgrims to decompress, share their experiences, and then you can go back later in the day for kind of a one-on-one experience. But this Mass, there were probably 20 people there. It was just really beautiful. The priest's homily was, you know, the petitions and the homily were very much geared to pilgrims. And I went back 2 other times, and it was a lot of the same, but those were all new pilgrims being there except for me, so I'm sure it was very meaningful for them. At communion time, he said, you know, this is the way we do communion. Like, basically, you know, just come up and, you know, you can, I don't remember all the particulars, but then he said, and if you don't want to receive communion, you can still come up. So I noted that. But it was somewhere in that time that I thought, this is just making, I don't know, so much more sense to me that, you know, it was something that I knew, but I understood again it took on new meaning. I really saw the Eucharist as the fulfillment and perhaps the ultimate fulfillment of this shared humanity that I had experienced walking. And to me, at that moment, the Eucharist became a sharing of humanity and divinity through Jesus, with each of us called to serve, to share, to give ourselves in that service of humanity. And so I have to be honest, as a Catholic woman laying claim to my spiritual pilgrimage, the stance of the Roman Catholic Church on who can or should receive communion. I went to a funeral mass the other day, and the priest said at communion time some of the restrictions, but then said, and if you are a Catholic that does not believe in everything the Catholic Church teaches, do not present yourself for communion. To me, that is such a limitation of the ultimate fulfillment of the Eucharist. It causes me deep pain and sorrow. I haven't reconciled this issue within myself. I'm really unsure where God is leading me on this issue. But as I have learned, the lessons of the Camino continue. And I trust that the Spirit, that God will continue to teach me. And if I need to walk another 400 miles to figure it out, maybe I'll do that. At this point, we're going to jump into some of the PowerPoint. Oh, just a couple things. If you want to look at this stuff later, this is the Credencial del Peregrino. You have to get if you want to get a certificate of completion when you get to Santiago, you have to get 1 stamp a day, and there are many, many places to get stamps along the way. I usually got them at the place that I stayed, and once you get to Sarria, which is about 110 kilometers from Santiago, you have to get 2 stamps a day. But honestly, nobody looked at this when I got my certificate. So, but it's kind of cool. It's a great memory for me. So I started in Pamplona just because of time of year I went and general timing and lots of things. But this was one of the shells along the way. It's shells and arrows that guide you on your way, and I really kind of got into enjoying the differences. Let's see. This doesn't seem to be there we go. Oops, sorry. I have to get out my other notes. So this, many of you have probably seen a picture like this, the Alto del Perdón e Monumento Peregrino, and for those of you who speak Spanish, I apologize. It is on a hill. This was my first day of walking outside of Pamplona. You can't see, but this is on a hill where there are a lot of windmills in the area also. So it's a pretty impressive scene. This is just a picture of some of the I don't know, public art, I guess, that's dedicated to pilgrims that I enjoyed. I have my shoes on that I walked the Santiago in, and I really want to do that with my boots. I haven't yet, but I still have them, so. I don't know. I'm going backwards, but I should be going forwards. I'll just adjust. This is one of the many markers along the way, the different types of markers. This is an old Roman bridge from, which was part of the Romana Calzada, which a Roman occupation occurred in that area from about 200 to about 700 BC. So this was part of one of the original Roman ways, paved roads. A lot of the arrows, the yellow arrows along the way were personalized. This one was karma. There was another one down the road that said Jesus. I decided I would not get into a spiritual, mystical battle of whatever, so I just have this one. So just a little note, the yellow arrows were the work of a priest named Don Elias Valina Sampredo, parish priest in a town, and I think in the 1980s he started going around marking the way with these yellow arrows, and I tell you, they were my lifeline, looking for those yellow arrows. This is just a cool church, I thought. The princes of Navarra, one of the regions of Spain, would take their oaths there. That's in a town called Estella. This is San Pedro de la Rua. This is just one of many times I had not visions, but this was my view. There are, I don't know if you can see way up there, there are pilgrims walking. This was on one of the alternate routes that I took, one of the options. And when I could, I did those. They usually led through more natural paths, but there were some times when the guidebook says, unless you've walked before, don't do this, or unless you're experienced, don't do this. And I avoided those, much to my husband's relief. This is just, again, I don't know, people just decide to start leaving things there, bandanas and ribbons and all sorts of things, just decorated. This was a little further on, but because it kind of fit with the public art, I put it here. So it was in a long, probably the longest stretch of the Camino where you are between cities. And so just something interesting to, look at. Just one of the many, portals that you walk through, and way up there, these aren't turning out quite as well as I'd hoped, there's this little statue. So this religious imagery is really all over, and I enjoyed seeing that. This is going to Logroño. They had some unique markers. This is leaving Logroño, and if you look, this is on a pedestrian underpass. If you look closely, you can see the shells. And it took me a minute, but those are all pilgrims looking like they're really leaning into the wind. And a green arrow in the footsteps, the only green arrow I saw. This is the Church of the Assumption in a little town called Navarrete. When we got there, there was some recorded Gregorian chant going on. Just really a beautiful moment, beautiful. The church is not that big, but it was really a lovely moment. Just another example of a fat little pilgrim. I was attracted to this statue because of the non-Caucasian imagery. This is approaching, this was one of the rockier parts. That was a little challenging. And this is called the cross up there is the Cruz de Meta Grande. I don't know if you can see it, but way on top, there are a pair of tennis shoes that somebody threw way up on top, which reminded me of the time my brother and I threw our tennies over telephone lines. And because we're from a family of 13, you did not throw tennies over telephone lines, and my mother was not happy, and she got her clothesline pole, and we went and got the tennies. Another example of the public art in a very little town called Ajes. I'm just impressed that people do this, This was in Burgos, the cathedral in Burgos. I found that I went to see the big cathedrals, but I really enjoyed the smaller churches best. I could never pray in these. Again, you can't see this, but in different languages it says, and God saw all that he had made, and it was good. Again, starting the Meseta, the road lying before me. Often, if you look way in the back, you can see that little tower poking out. That's what you kind of, as you're walking along, that's what appears. And it's this sense of kind of being drawn. You can kind of see yourself making progress in a way. Then you can see also the road in the distance, knowing you still have a long way to go. This is the ruins of I think the convent de San Anton Abad. One of the interesting things here is underneath that arch there are, I don't know what you call them, the word escapes me, little cutouts where the nuns would leave food for the pilgrims. This is from probably about the 11th or 12th century. They also apparently had some kind of foot salve, which was supposed to be a miraculous healing for some kind of awful foot fungus that pilgrims would get. This was in one of my favorite little towns called Castro de Harris. It was the only time I saw an illuminated yellow arrow, but since I was leaving at about 6:30 in the morning, maybe 7, it was still quite dark, and I thought, that's awesome. This is looking back at Castro Harris. Castro Harris is on that hill right by the sun, and you walk down that, and then you walk flat, and then you walk up. So anybody know what the words at the top say? I just thought it was kind of fun. Mujeres y vino todo divino. I know the Lopezes know this. Women and wine are all divine. Again, there's kind of a whole story behind just finding this cool little cafe, but I love that saying. This was at a albergue, a hostel that I stayed at, Espiritu de Santo, and really one of the most meaningful things about this is that I went to a prayer service by a nun who reminded me of my aunt, who was a nun. I mean, just similarities. Everything she did, because she spoke no English, was in body language. And one of the best prayer services I've ever been to. There was myself, I think another woman from Korea, Japan, and this nun who explained the entire image of the Virgin with the stars to the two of us. It was just amazing, just amazing. So I had to put this one in. Just a lot of people putting rocks, arrows. This was in Leon, I believe. So moving along. So I said I was there in Holy Week, and for those of you who have ever been in Holy Week in Spain, in many different communities, they have these processions. They dress up. The first time I saw this with my husband when we were in Barcelona, we saw processions with people cloaked in white robes and hoods, and we all went, this reminds us of the Ku Klux Klan. But apparently, traditionally, these were penitents who would dress in these robes, and they would have the hoods on because they didn't want to be public. And then they have these processions, and honestly, there's a drum, boom, boom, boom. That's exactly what it sounds like. And they carry these huge floats related to the Passion. This was I thought was interesting, the old bishop's palace or residence in a place called Astorga, another really historically old town with a lot of like Roman routes and coming through. But it made me, this was done designed by Gaudi. It's one of the, I think only 4 or 5 works by Gaudi that are outside of Catalonia. And the contrast with this and the Pope Francis's emphasis on humility and poverty was just, it just really hit me. Part of the old Roman walls for the city, and this is actually kind of between the bishop's residence and leads to the cathedral, so he had a private way to get from the cathedral to his residence without like being seen in public. This is just one of the ephemeral communal families I had. Some people join these families from day one and they continue. I was in and out of a lot of them. This is Cruz de Ferro, which is supposed to be a really great spiritual experience, and you're supposed to leave a rock with some memento of things that you're putting down, that you're either sorry for, or baggage that you're carrying, spiritual baggage. I felt like that was too much pressure, so I left nothing there. But I happened to be with friends. The Army of Peace, I love this. I just thought, if we could get every leader of the world to walk the Camino without their security duty, that we might actually have peace. Hey friends, what do you love about your life? Something to think about. Just at early morning, this was another optional path, steep out of the valley there. This was the day after Easter. The other route went just along the road, and I wanted to do the less traveled route, and one of my Camino angels showed up a little later along that route. Just an example of a cool house in Othabrero, reminds me of a hobbit house, shale and thatch. This is a little chapel from the 11th century. This chapel is mentioned in what's called the Codex Calixticus. I'm going to mess that up. But it was an ancient document, again, from the 1100s, that it was basically a guidebook, an early guidebook for pilgrims on the Camino even then. And this little chapel of St. Peter and St. Peter was mentioned in that. So I thought it was kind of cool. Made it to Sarria, another little chapel in Sarria. As I said, I was really attracted to the little chapels. This was one of the, if you look at that first, it says Donativo. So this little guy had set up, Julian is his name. Oh, I don't have Julian. Had set up just to stop in the courtyard of this building, big wooden doors. He had all sorts of things, eggs and pastries and cake and coffee. And I tell you, they did not have any external heaters underneath those eggs. The food safety rules are way different. But everything, you just ate what you wanted and donated what you wanted. It was just an amazing thing for me. Eucalyptus trees. Santiago, 39 kilometers, almost there. Another early morning start on a really foggy day. There I am at the cathedral. And that's it. So I would be happy to entertain any questions of a more practical side, or if you want to talk to me later, that's fine too. I'll hang around.
Does anyone have any questions for Rosan?
Paul does. Golly, the shell is, well, I do know that when the ancient pilgrims would arrive in Santiago, they would get a shell, which was, I think, the sign of St. James. Is that?
It is. And it would prove that they made it to the end.
Yeah, it had proved that they made it to the end. Now, pilgrims often get their shells right away, but I did not get a shell. I had, I don't know, for those of you who can see it, I had some friends make me little shells, little patches. This one, in fact, has a crucifix from a rosary from my friend's mother. And so this is what, I don't know, guided me. So I did not get a shell. Well, I tried to, my goal was to keep it at about 15 pounds. I ended up being about 17 pounds. That did not include any water or food. So, yeah. And I tried to pack really light.
How many miles did
total. From Pamplona to Santiago is 711 kilometers or 420 miles. I did that in actually 28 days. I thought that I could average about 25 kilometers a day, 15 miles a day, and I actually walked faster than that. I built in a rest day. I didn't take a rest day. I'm not a rest day person. And honestly, some of these towns are so small that to spend it, and I didn't like the big cities. You know, I walked into Burgos, saw the cathedral, and then thought, I think I'm gonna walk on. Ended up walking on another 10 kilometers to I don't know, Tardajos. Did you guys spend any time there? Stayed in a Donativo hostel where I was the only person there. The man managing the hostel at that time was there for 2 weeks just to volunteer. It was really beautiful, so I'm really glad I left. But so I walked faster than I thought I would. Hi.
Okay. I was just saying, pilgrims usually say after a pilgrimage, it continues to unpack the pilgrimage. So I'm just wondering what that looked like for you.
Yeah, it continues to unpack. I don't know if I can articulate exactly how, but certainly some of these spiritual moments, especially this idea of this shared humanity and what that means as far as my spiritual pilgrimage. And yeah, like the lessons about anxiety too, you know, like I've always known that, but it was like, holy cats, you have to do something about this. So trying to get more in touch with not letting myself get drawn into that. So that's one of the ways.
Paul.
The cost of olive oil has gone up 100% in the last 11 months in southern Spain, but that's primarily the south. I'm curious whether global warming was implied by that high heat. Did you have rain?
We had, I can't answer about the heat. We did have some days and where it was quite warm. I mean, this is what I wore for whatever, 30 days. And I rolled up my pants and I wore a t-shirt and yeah, so we had probably 4 days that it was quite warm. I brought along all sorts of rain gear and I only had to use it, I think, 3 times. And then it was for short periods, like for 2 hours or something. And that is kind of a rainy time. So was not a really popular time to go, but that's partly why I chose that time too. Yeah.
I think we have time maybe for one more question. Linda.
Ever fear for your safety?
Never. Never for my safety at all. I had times I showed you, I walked, there were times when I was out in the woods, you know, and at one point the path did kind of disappear, and the guidebook said it would disappear. And it said, well, just keep bearing southwest. And I thought, okay, well, I got out my compass and I'm going west, and there are a couple people in the forest. I don't know what they were doing, older people. And no. And he said, mucho montañas, you know, pointed me in the other direction. So I was going maybe a little too west. But so people were helpful. I never, even in the big cities. Now, I wasn't there at night in the big cities, or I was in Lyon because I stayed in Lyon one night, but no, I was never afraid for my safety. Never.
Well, I just want to thank you, Roseanne, you know, in thinking of your comments about the Eucharist and why God came to earth to walk with us. You know, it was to share our humanity and, of course, to shine the light of divinity in a way that all of us hopefully can see. You have shown a light for us today, Rosan, so let's thank Rosan for her time with us.